Who I met before, my name is Collin. I lead product marketing here at Sybill, and I am joined by Shivansh, who is our head of product. Shivansh, if you want to say hey.
Hey everyone.
Here, here's sort of what you can all expect today. We're going to cover kind of three main things. One, we'll cover what's new. So all the stuff that our team has shipped to the Sybill platform in the last month or so. Then we'll cover what's better. I think of this as a bunch of little fixes that we've made to just make the Sybill platform function better, maybe more the way that you would have expected it to. And then the third bucket is what's coming. So this is all the stuff that we have ahead for the next month or two. Now, for most of these features, I'll try to give a high level explainer, and then Shivansh or I will take us through a live demo of the product as much as we can. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Shivansh and I will try to address them as we go, but if not, we'll save some time at the very end for Q&A. All right, let it rip. Let's talk about what's everyone's favorite part. What's new? So here's something that we heard for a long time. Now, almost every platform out there now has a chat-based interface of some sort where you can ask AI about your data. Sybil was one of the very first to market with this feature, particularly kind of in the revenue tech space. If you're not familiar, Ask Sybil lets you query across not just one or two calls, but across hundreds of deals and calls at the same time. But our users were constantly copying and pasting those outputs into other mediums like decks and dashboards. The second problem that we saw was that our customers really loved putting their favorite prompts on a schedule. So recurring prompts let you run your favorite prompts on a schedule and then push those updates to Sybil or Slack or an email. So for example, you could do a weekly prep for your one-on-one with your sales manager, or you could do a monthly pipeline review, and those could run on a schedule. The problem is more deal specific updates don't really run on fixed schedules. Deals move forward by a meeting or by a change in deal stage. None of those things have consistent length. So doing something weekly or monthly didn't quite make sense. So we wanted to find a way to take all this deal analysis that customers really loved and make it available in a format that was helpful when a customer actually needed it. So here's what we did about it. First, we created deck creation in Sybil. So now you can ask Sybil to build a business case deck for your prospects, give you a 10-slide breakdown of your ICP, or create a win-loss analysis deck, all without bugging your marketing team. I've been using this a lot. And as of a few weeks ago now, you can export and save your decks as HTML, PowerPoint, and other formats. So you can edit them, pull them directly into Google Drive, just making them a lot more accessible than they even were before. A second thing that we shipped right around this time was dashboard creation. So this has been a big fan favorite for our customers as well as internal Sybil users. Now you can build a sales dashboard in seconds just by writing a single prompt. All of that is going to be built on your sales data, and it's done typically in a very interactive, visually pleasing format. And as of last week, you can now actually save and refresh those dashboards whenever you want. So the problem that these were had when we first shipped them, even a month ago, was you would generate a dashboard and there wasn't a way to refresh it week over week. We've changed that. Now you can go back and you can refresh it, and you can even save that dashboard so it's easy for you to view on a consistent basis. Last and certainly not least, we wanted to solve for the time nature of all this. So that's why we launched automated prompts. With automated prompts, you can fire Sybil prompts still on a schedule, or on a change after a meeting has been processed, or after a change in deal stage. So say, for example, you can fire a sales to CS handoff after a deal is marked closed won, or you can do a call coaching prompt that fires every single time a demo is taken by one of your new reps. All these different deal stages and different moments in a deal are now signals that you can have Sybil run a prompt on, so that you're getting the insights you need right when you actually want and need them. All right, let's demo some of these. I'm going to demo decks, and then I'll hand over to Shivansh to show off some dashboards and automated prompts. All right, decks. So here's a prompt that I ran. I asked Sybil, I said, hey, based on all of our active deals from the last 6 months and conversations across sales and marketing, build a slide deck proposal for a strategic shift to targeting RevOps in our sales, marketing, and outbound efforts. Ground it in findings from our closed won deals. So this is the deck that Sybil built. It has this proposal of RevOps and Sybil's primary ICP, It kind of summarizes a lot of our team's internal conversations. It pulls from our actual closed one data that we're seeing 60+% of our active deals have RevOps as a key stakeholder in our deals. And this was generated in a minute or two. And so we have pain points, all the stuff that is coming and backed from direct quotes and deals that are in our system. Another example of this that I really liked was we're seeing more and more that customers are wanting to expand Sybill outside of sales. So I said, hey, look at the account that you think is ripest for expansion and create a proposal deck for that account to expand their Sybill usage across sales, marketing, and CS, citing their spoken pain points. Benefits they've gotten from the platform and other relevant factors. I anonymized it just for the benefit. And there it is. Here's a deck with this proposal. It has quotes from their team in their own words that you can read here, that these are all pulled from our calls. And I can quickly add this to Google Drive. So we'll see if this works for me live. Open in Drive. There it is. Boom. Quickly saved and exported to Google Drive. All right, that's Dex. I'm gonna hand over to Shivansh to show some dashboards and automated prompts.
All right. So, a couple of cases to show here. I was playing around with on Matt's account about the kind of analysis dashboards we can make. So, the first one that popped up was, let's say, if you want to analyze a pipeline and do a multi-threading analysis. So, gave it a prompt about what I want. It created something. Then I wanted some more details about potential stakeholders and who need to be looped in at what point in time. So, gave it that prompt and it created this. I also asked it to anonymize the data for this demo. So that's how you're seeing these accounts labeled this way. So the dashboard it created is pretty interesting here. It lets me filter by stages. It lets me look at what's critical, what's high priority, medium, and low. And for each of these accounts, it tells me further details that I could dig into. So when I click on the dashboard, I can see who the economic buyers are, what the champions are, technical evaluators. We can know about all of these things. And what's even good is like it tells you what to filter at what point in time, and you can keep iterating with it, tell it to add a filter, remove a filter, add more details in the dashboard. And so moving out of sales and more into stuff that I really find useful out of these dashboards is analyzing our ICPs, because it's very important for me to know who we are building for and who they are that we are selling to. So I asked it to create a dashboard, again, anonymizing the data for who our ICPs are. And what it did was create this dashboard, which is extremely useful for me to understand. It created a dashboard which gives me multiple options to filter out of and understand our users. So by segment, it tells me who our fit is by company size, by industry, and it does a scorecard of who we are winning against, who we are selling to. It does personas, it does pains and use cases that we are solving for and are most needed in the market right now. It also gives me a breakdown of CRM tech companies, who we are winning against, and who are mentioned more often in the deals we plan against, and then win patterns, loss patterns, pipeline fit, and a summary of each of these. That gives me so much insight into our customers with all the data that Sybill has. So that's dashboards. Let's talk about automated prompts. For automated prompts, I thought of what is the best way to demo this and saw a few of the ones that we are actually making use of and making the most out of. So saw this very interesting prompt that Matt had set up where he has a trial success plan deal that runs automated prompt that runs every time a deal moves to a stage, which is stage 3. He can also choose to add conditions like, let's say a deal amount is greater than this. I only want the prompt to be figured at that point in time, or the pipeline is this in my CRM. And then he can go on and explain what he wants in the prompt, test it on a deal, and it gives you an output which basically will be triggered only when a deal moves to a stage 3 deal. And basically it is generating a plan out of it. What's even more exciting and I found really interesting was he has a channel in Slack which is called Swim Insights, and he chooses to send all of these details and all of his automated prompts to that channel. So now he has his own conversation history on Slack with Sybil where he has all the context of how he has been moving through deals, what is the success plan, what it should look like. So he's prepared for whatever need comes by.
Let's keep moving. So If you've been with Sybill for a while, you know that we got our start as a meeting recorder. Then we launched CRM autofill, and that was a big leap forward for us. We were one of the first ones to launch that capability. And then we launched email ingest and generation. It expanded. But those three buckets of your meetings, CRM, and emails are like the holy trinity of deal context, which is why when you look at most revenue tools, they have those same three places for context: meetings, emails, CRM, meetings, emails, CRM. But the thing that we're seeing more and more is that revenue context is coming from not just three places, but from 100 different places. It's living in your docs where you are talking about how you handle objections. It lives in your phone calls and your cold calls. It's in your internal comms and documentation. It's in your website data. It's in your product analytics. And if you want to have a true living memory of how you win deals, if you want to have a Sybil truly be like a brain that understands from why you win, how you're closing deals, it helps you automate kind of the best behaviors. You need to be able to pull pieces of context from anywhere. And so we wanted to solve for that. So here are three kind of buckets of context that we've recently launched. First, in the last month, we launched our dialers integration. Second, we've launched the ability to link internal calls to deals. And then third, our ingest APIs. So quick word on each and how they work. So today, our dialer integration is live with Zoom Phone and Outreach. So when you connect your dialer, each cold call is kind of getting the full Sybil treatment. You get summaries, you get follow-ups, you get every single touch point added to Sybil as part of your larger deal context. So you can quickly know, like, hey, what are the openers that are actually booking meetings? What isn't booking meetings? Why did this prospect that has since closed even decide to move forward with us in the first place? What was kind of the early pain points they cited? Your team gets full visibility on that from a much earlier stage in your deal. Secondly, recognize that so much important deal strategy happens not just in your meetings with your prospect, but it's happening in the meetings about your prospect. It's the sales team huddles where you're breaking down all your active pipeline. So much strategy happens there. And this is why we've created the ability now to recognize and then link internal calls to deals. So if you have a standing sales team meeting, you can now link that call to a deal and Sybil will know that's part of the context. So say, for example, your boss, your CRO says, hey, I want you to extend the trial for prospects A. That context, if you link that conversation to Sybil, Sybil will now be aware of that context and treat it as part of the plan for that account. It feels like a small thing, but linking that forward and Sybil recognizing the internal calls are also relevant for deals, we think was a pretty relevant leap forward. And then finally, we launched ingest APIs, which sounds technical and scary. Here's what it really means. It means you can really pull in context from anywhere. So whether it's your docs, it's your product analytics or your internal threads, this ability to pull in data from really any source into Sybil is something that we've just launched and is live in the product today. I call this the what's better section. These are features that are not necessarily brand new, but that we've made big improvements to over the last month and that we're going to make perform in a way that just feels and looks better for you. So let's talk about perhaps the most important one, your note taker. So about 6 months ago, we launched our invisible recorder, which meant now you could record meetings without having a bot in the meeting, actually taking up screen real estate. So this means you could actually record a meeting and you don't see Colin's table assistant taking up one of your Zoom squares. Now, tools like Granola have had an invisible note taker for a pretty long time, capturing transcripts. Granola is much more sales agnostic. It's kind of just a general note taker. But this is a true invisible recorder. So meaning that Sybil was able to not just capture a transcript from your meeting invisibly, but actually can record the meeting. So you get the facial interaction, you get the body language, you get a true recording of the conversation. This was big for sales tech, but it wasn't perfect. So we covered a couple problems. Sometimes your Sybil bot would join the meeting, but your invisible desktop recorder might record the meeting too. And it was kind of like having two separate recorders firing at the same time. So you would see sometimes redundant recordings. You would see two different settings menus. You had to control what does your invisible recorder do and what does your default recorder do. And perhaps the biggest problem is that admins could not easily see or control what was and was not being recorded across the team. So a leap forward, but it was also confusing. And our customers were kind of left with a lot of questions like, did that call get logged? Is this working properly? Did it trigger CRM autofill? And so we fixed all of that. The Simplest way to put this is you now have one recorder for your entire team. Here's what that means. So you'll no longer see duplicate recordings. You can use the invisible recorder or the traditional recorder, but you won't get duplicates. You also, now your recording preferences are shared between your traditional and invisible recorder. So what you choose on one automatically transfers to and is updated on the other. Third, important for our admins and people who are kind of maybe that you're RevOps and you're running this for your team. Admins can now set recording and sharing settings across the entire team. So you don't have to guess anymore what's private, what's public. You can set default rules that are true for the entire team. And then finally, if multiple people are from your team are on a call, one recorder will capture the meeting for everyone. So whether the bot recorder and the invisible recorder, so you're not seeing multiple bots pop up or even multiple recorders firing at the same time. It grants visibility to everyone who's on the call with one recorder. And short way to put it, everything works the way that it should actually work. I also want to call out because this was something I was not using and didn't even realize. Did we mention that invisible recorder can record your Slack huddles? Super good to know. If you haven't used that, do it. I was using it last week. Wildly helpful. All right, let's talk about a few more fixes. About 6 months ago, we launched tasks, and this is the ability for Sybill to scan your meetings and capture, create, and then even execute tasks directly from those meetings. Two of the most common use cases we were seeing, as you would expect, kind of in the sales world, are creating follow-up meetings and drafting emails. So meeting ends, hey, I need to plan our next meeting, and a draft emails or engagement for the upcoming meeting. The problem was if you wanted to do those things from Ask Sybill, not from tasks, it was a little bit clunky. Like you couldn't create and schedule meetings from Ask Sybill. You could only do it from tasks. And you couldn't create, draft, and send emails or multiple emails directly from Ask Sybill. So we fixed that. Now you can create and schedule multiple meetings at once directly from Ask Sybill, or you can draft multiple meetings at once directly from Ask Sybill. You can see on the left here some example prompts here of like, hey, these are three follow-ups. Sybill drafts it. You can open it directly in your calendar, or same thing with emails. You can open it directly in Gmail from Sybill, and Sybill has multiple drafts and invites kind of ready and at the go. If you're around in April, we launched, this is one of our biggest launches of the year. We launched our MCP connector. And that was all kind of part of this goal that we want to make Sybill context as accessible as possible. So we were one of the very first connectors approved in Claude, which is awesome. You can find Sybill in kind of Claude's connector library. We've since released a second iteration of our MCP. You might just notice, particularly if you are using Sybill in Claude, what you should notice is that Sybill queries will run faster and more efficiently. So less having to call back and forth. Claude being able to pull from Ask Sybill what it needs more quickly so that hopefully your time in Claude is just as fast as you'd expect it to be. We were noticing a lot of times that if you wanted to run Sybill in Claude, it wasn't as fast as running it in Ask Sybill natively. This should close a lot of that gap so that the experience is very similar between the two. And then second, we also released our new activity view. So if you look at any deal, you can now scroll and see every single touch point in that deal just with a single scroll. Again, the goal here is we want to make all the deal context that you have as accessible as possible. Finally, a few quick fixes. These are just, I think, like efficiency, nice little touches here. One is we got feedback from our customers that our snippets experience sucked. It was just that it was funky. It was not as fast as it should be. We fixed it. Now it should be very intuitive. You can highlight text and create a clip instantly. It's really easy to draft and create and share snippets in Sybill. We fixed that and it's ready to rock. Second, now you can add multiple files to any Ask Sybill query. So whether you're creating an automated prompt like Shivansh just showed you, or you're running a query in Ask Sybill, you can attach multiple files. So say, for example, you wanted to have a sales report from last year and maybe your specific framework you want to coach on. You can attach both of those files, run your query with that context ready for that query. We launched Command K. Command K lets you find anything you're looking for or create and run Sybill queries very fast just by hitting Command K. All right, let's do some live demos. This first one, I'm going to warn you, I am nervous about logistically because I want to show you the side by side of the invisible recorder experience. But by definition, it's supposed to be invisible. All right. So here's what you should be able to see. On the left, you're seeing my Sybill app. This is the normal browser app that all of you are used to probably using. On the right here, I've opened the Sybill desktop app. And what you'll see is actual parity. It's showing that on both surfaces, hey, my video recorder is firing. So the browser app knows, the desktop app knows, and they're communicating and in sync with one another. And you can see that these two are lined up in that way. Second, if I look at my settings, you'll see now that I can choose recorder priority. What I've chosen now is that my deals prioritize, or my conversations prioritize the invisible recorder. So by default, my invisible recorder will record my meetings. And if something doesn't work properly, so say the invisible recorder for some reason cannot join, my bot recorder exists as a fallback. And so I could change that. And those settings are at parity between both the web app and the desktop. All right, so let's talk a little bit now about drafting multiple emails at one time. So here's the prompt that I ran in Sybill. I said, pull the top 10 accounts from last year that are ripest for re-engagement and draft re-engagement emails for each. So we'll pull those accounts, and then I'm able to quickly here scroll through, and here are all these personalized re-engagement emails that are built on that deal context. Subject line is personalized, the recipient is personalized. All of it was pulling from our active deals and writing emails that actually fit those deals. And then I could quickly open those in Gmail and fire them off. So if you're thinking about re-engagement, this is a huge opportunity. If you have follow-ups you need to run, you could say, hey, here are all the follow-ups I need to run, draft emails for them, and you can go through, tweak, approve, and send all directly from Ask Sybill. Another example here is I said, look at all the deals from last quarter that wanted us to re-engage in Q3 and create event invites for each of them. So Sybill pulled some of the context, like, hey, this is an account that said their outreach Kaya contract is ending and they're evaluating Sybill. And look, here's a calendar invite for me to meet with that prospect. And again, these are all personalized based on what was the specific thing that this account said, why they wanted re-engagement, why they wanted us to circle back in Q3. And then I realized, like, wait, I can't just put a calendar invite on their calendar. That would be rude of me. So Sybill, can you draft re-engagement emails as well? And Sybill said, yeah, sure, cuz I can draft re-engagement emails. So here are the re-engagement emails for each of those accounts. And it takes into account, you'll notice that it says, I've sent over a calendar invite. So it took into account the context of you were just creating a calendar invite. Now you want me to craft an email. Sybill is just deeply thinking about not only the deal context, but the actual workflow of a rep that's happening in the app. All right, let's talk about the section that probably most of you have been waiting for. What's the stuff that we are working on that is right around the corner? Everything that is ahead for the next month or so. Something I mentioned earlier is that we're learning more and more that deal context is not just happening in your calls, emails, and CRMs, right? It's happening in your internal docs, it's happening in your internal conversations. But more and more, what are reps doing when they want to get a deal across the line, that last mile, is they are creating Slack channels. So we are launching Slack ingest, where Sybill will be able to pick up on and learn from everything that is happening in your Slack channels, chosen Slack channels, and pull that in as deal context. So say, for example, you dropped it into your channel that you have with a prospect. Hey, here's the next steps in our trial. Sybill is aware of that context and pulls it in as deal context for what's happening in that deal. Or maybe here's another example. Your team is you have an internal Slack thread where you're strategizing about a deal. Maybe it's your sales channel, and Sybill would learn from and attach that context as well. And calling back to the features I launched earlier, if you really want to kind of get the most out of internal context, you could link those internal meetings that you have to those deals, and you can record Slack huddles. I think these three together, again, the edge we're realizing is so much of the best deal strategy is not the things that can be picked up on just from the meeting with the prospect, but all the conversations your team is having about a prospect, about a deal. Next, we're also launching even more dialer integrations. So I shared earlier that our Zoom phone integration is already live. You can connect on a product. Outreach is already live in product. We have some that are ready to beta and some that are coming soon. So Nooks is ready to beta. So if you're a Sybill customer and a Nooks customer and you want to be a part of our beta program, let us know. You can email Sarah at Sybill.ai or email myself, Collin at Sybill.ai, and we'll get you squared away and get you to our beta program. And also Ring Central is also on that list where it's ready to beta if you are interested in it. And then just around the corner, we'll be working with HubSpot, Styler, and AirCall are coming in the near future. And then if there's one that you feel like, hey, we're using this one, let us know and we'll consider it, evaluate it, see if it's something that we can add. No promises, but we do sincerely want to make sure that we have the dialers that our customers need. All right. For this one, I'm going to hand it off to the man with the plan, Shivansh Singh, if you want to cover some of our next features.
All right. So let's talk about MCP. So a bit of background there. So Sybill already understands your deal as Sybill is sitting in your calls, emails, your CRM, all of these places, right? So this particular release ties really well with API ingest that we talked about, as it extends this brain concept in two different directions. So Colin, he talked about API inputs, which we recently released. So background, going back, our API is used to push data and Sybill's insight out, which enabled you to use Sybill in tools like, let's say, Claude. And now it is pulling your data in from calls, emails, documents, records. So basically all of the shapes that a sales context needs. And then this imported data, it is enriched and saved onto Sybill's context graph, which makes the same brain that I talked about that is behind every summary and answer you see more enriched. So bringing these sources in through API makes Sybill remember the context, right? Now let's talk what's next. A step further is let's talk about what MCP connectors will do. So with these, Sybill now will be able to reach into your tools that you live in. So for example, Notion, Slack, Salesforce, Google Drive, and basically anything that speaks MCP, Sybill will be able to read what it needs live from these tools. Also, it doesn't just fetch, it reasons over what is it fetching and finds the deal context associated with what it's fetching and gives you an answer that encompasses all of these contexts. So a good way to think about it is that API ingest makes your data part of this brain that Sybill has, and what connectors do is let that brain reach into different tools that you're using. Let's talk about what's next. Companies. So autofill has been a feature that's really valued in Sybil, and we used to autofill deals. But something we've heard time and again is that reps, even if they're able to maintain these opportunity records in the CRM, it's very difficult to manage the account data and keep it up to date. So things like industry, company size, what a company actually does, where the relationship with the company stands, all of these things, they are not updated. And this is not because reps are lazy. This is because the intelligence that fills this data in lies in calls, emails, and all of these contexts. So nobody's able to hand copy it into CRM. The segmentation is fuzzy, account scoring is inaccurate. So company autofill fixes all of this. What it does is Sybil listens to meetings, calls, emails, and all the context it already captures, understands the account, and writes back to your CRM at an account level. And because every account is now actually filled in, the deal health, the activity, and all of this you can trust because it's based out of real data. The setup process and flow works just like it would work in a deal autofill, which you have been using and loving. The fun part though is now this unlocks a mini CRM view without even a CRM connection. So Sybil is able to understand companies at a much deeper level without a CRM as well.
I'll let you take over screen share, Shvash, so that you can demo these.
Perfect. All right. Let me know when my screen's visible.
All set.
Okay, so the UI is still being worked out because it's coming, but let me show you something I was playing around with. So I connected Notion with Sybil through MCP. Now let's see what it unlocks. I created this page in Notion where I just found some data and filled up what a competitive objection handling against Gong should be like. So filled out a playbook kind of a thing and then had Sybil look into it. So post connection, I asked Sybil, can you give me a TLDR of what this page is about in Notion? And it used the right tools to fetch the MCP and get the right document, find it, and get what's important out of this document for me to read at this point in time. Now, what's more exciting is I asked it to find a recent deal from this quarter where prospect was also evaluating Gong. And I asked it to grade how as Matt, I handled these objections against the Notion playbook that I just wrote. I wanted it to tell me everything grounded to what I actually said. So I asked it to do that. I asked it to anonymize the data. It found a deal and then it created this doc for me. If you see here in this doc, the rubric that it is taking to rate my pitches against Gong is exactly what it says in this document. So all of these titles are basically what it's judging me against and giving me a feedback on. And it is actually finding for each category moments in the call, and it is telling me what worked, what I exactly said, and what I missed to say, and how I should have said it, which would have been a stronger land according to the playbook. So that's one thing that's pretty exciting. Let's talk about company autofill. So under integrations, under your HubSpot settings or your CRM settings, you can now find this option of setting up the autofill. So what it looks like is you're selecting the fields that make sense to autofill. Sybill also recommends what it wants you to pick. When you're ready, you can go next here. And then you're able to decide what is it that you want Sybill to actually autofill. So each of these fields Sybill will be able to autofill. And then what this gives you is also in Sybill, this page called companies page. It is telling you for each company how many deals are active, what is the last activity that happened, and also the activity timeline where you reached out, where the prospect reached out, all of these data that you see. What do you call it?
Wait, one thing I realized I forgot to share is our Command K feature. This lets you search for a specific deal if you wanted to, but I really like this idea of straight from here, I can say create a recurring prompt every Monday at 9 a.m., looking at all of our competitive mentions in the last week. Analyze what prospects were looking for, why they wanted to switch, and objections to overcome. This is me really hoping this works. So I hit enter. Sybill's thinking about it, and it immediately created an automated prompt. So I had this weekly competitive analysis. It's set to fire on Monday mornings at 9 a.m. I could choose where I wanted to fire to. If I had said email or Slack, it would have done that. And then I could hit save and that would be ready to rock. Or if you want, you can do the same thing with Command K to find a specific deal or find a specific conversation. That is super useful. Highly recommend it if you're into commands and keyboard shortcuts. All right. That is all for now. Again, thank you all for joining. Hope you all have a good long weekend for those of you who are stateside. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, Collin@Sybill.ai. You can find myself or Shivansh on LinkedIn as well. And thanks for making the time. Chat soon.